Excellent. Well, welcome everybody to the program. As people come in the room, we will get started because it's 12 o'clock. My name is Jeremy Foyt. I'm the co-founder of NEWaukee. We are hosting a program called Cafe Conversations. We do this usually around once a week with leaders from around the state, either business or civic or nonprofit leaders and government officials. This is part of our Cloud Cafe, where we have a ton of programs each week around a variety of topics that might find interesting that you can connect to online here. So if you want to sign up for the NEWaukee newsletter, we send that out informing you of programs and information in the next upcoming weeks. So I am joined today with Caleb Frostman. He is the Secretary of Workforce Development in Wisconsin. Welcome, Caleb.
Thanks, Jeremy, for having me. It's good to be here.
Me and Caleb actually go a little far back, as we worked on one of the NEWaukee initiatives statewide a long time ago called YP Week when you were in Door County. Why don't you talk to us about Door County? Because since we're not vacationing there right now, maybe you can give us the future of that.
Sure, just at Door County?
Yeah.
Yeah, no, I was really happy. So I grew up in Green Bay and then lived in the Twin Cities for a number of years, and was really trying to get back to Northeast Wisconsin, and found a dream job in Door County and moved back there to Sturgeon Bay, and just loved being in a smaller town and being so close to nature. Obviously all the state parks. I'm a big outdoors guy, and it was a really cool experience to have, kind of for the first time in my life, a real small town experience, and just wonderful people, wonderful scenery, and really enjoyed being there.
So are you still in Sturgeon Bay? Are you still living there?
No, I made the move to Madison about a year ago.
Okay, cool. So I'm going to talk kind of a little bit about a couple questions for you just about your career path and then trajectory. And obviously we'll get into current topics and state of affairs, which is probably the most pressing thing, but wanted to give perspective to the people joining who might not know about you and might not know about DWD and all the different things you do, because there is a lot. So first, can you tell us about your career leading up to this and why you really chose to make the jump to the state position?
Sure. Yeah. So my career, I was a little bit rudderless in high school or going into college, and I wasn't sure what I wanted to do. And the male role models of my life kind of advised me to go toward business. And so I set my sights on a business degree from UW-Madison. So I was a real estate major. And when I graduated in 2007, what was hiring were banks. I was thinking I might want to work for a developer, but banks were hiring. So I went to work for M&I Bank in their commercial real estate finance area in the Twin Cities. I was looking for a bigger city experience, either in Chicago or Minneapolis, just to try something different. So I went to M&I, and it was interesting. I started right at the very beginning of the Great Recession. So what an interesting time. I learned a ton. Yeah, great timing. I'm glad they kept me on. It was an interesting couple of years, but I learned so much, and kind of a trial by fire type deal. I was there for 4 years doing mostly underwriting on commercial real estate loans, anything from $100,000 to, I think our biggest loan there might have been $25 million. And then moved to US Bank 4 years in, and was there for 5 years. They had weathered the credit storm very well and were in a position. So M&I spent most of my time trying to get money back from people. And at US Bank, I was mostly trying to get money out the door. And so learned a lot there and was there for 5 years. And like I said, after about 9 years in the Twin Cities, I was really trying to get back to Wisconsin. And I also really wanted to change industries. I was not having a very fulfilling experience in banking for me, and I had the most meaningful experiences as a volunteer outside of work. And so I thought if I could find a way to get paid to do meaningful work, whether that was fundraising for a nonprofit or running one, I was going to try to do that. And I found economic development, which is kind of the perfect marriage of where I had been and where I wanted to go. Helping my neighbors improve the quality of their life, but also putting to use my business experience in finance and real estate. And so I applied for the executive director role in Door County, and the organization had only had one executive director for 29 years. And so I came in after him and really enjoyed that role. It really was a way to invest in your community. But when I was there, I also just felt really strongly that the biggest impediments to economic growth for a large swath of Wisconsinites were based on policy and based on legislation. And so our senator in that area resigned to take a job at, ironically, DWD. And so I ran for that Senate seat and won a special election, and then lost the general election in the fall. And a lot of the work I had done in economic development was workforce development, whether it's youth apprenticeship or other training programs. And so that had kind of piqued my interest in Door County. And then obviously with the new administration, I was interested in serving there. And so this was kind of an intuitive fit for the background and things I had worked on in Door County, and as well as some of the experiences I had in the Twin Cities. So that was kind of the I guess at this point, 13-year story in about 3 minutes, but that's kind of how that went.
That's a good highlight. DW, I think I was on with the secretary of the Wisconsin Economic Development Corporation the other day, and the state has so many acronyms: DWD, WEDC. What does DWD do for those that don't know or aren't familiar with it? Or even, there's so many different things. You have WEDA, you have so many different other programs out there. What does DWD do? Is like a top level so people can kind of grasp that?
Sure. So DWD is essentially the state's kind of human resource experts. So we do a number of things. We have 6 divisions, one of which is just operations. That's just like it sounds, operates the agency. But the other 5 include, obviously pretty high profile these days, is unemployment insurance. Wisconsin was the first state to have unemployment insurance. That's when someone gets let go of work through no fault of their own. They're eligible for unemployment insurance, and we're obviously really busy with that these days. Another area is workers' compensation. We were also the first state with workers' compensation. So if someone is injured on the job, a grand bargain that was struck 100+ years ago was that, I can't remember the exact phrasing, but anyway, the folks, there's no need to prove what happened. Anyways, you get compensated for being injured on the job. So workers' compensation is the other division. We also do vocational rehab, which is helping people with disabilities, physical and developmental, find work, find a better job, or keep a job. We also do employment and training. So you hear about things like Wisconsin Fast Forward, or both youth apprenticeship and regular apprenticeship. That goes through our employment training division. And then lastly, we have an equal rights division, which is workplace discrimination, housing discrimination. And so those 5 or 6 divisions are what we focus on, depending on where the economy is at. Some are more busy than others. Obviously, employment training has been really busy the last number of years as the economy has recovered. In the last 5 weeks, unemployment insurance has been really obviously slammed with an unprecedented number of claims and calls. So it depends on where the economy is at, but all 6 are really integral to what we do.
Yeah, and I think since we're on that topic, we do have a question already in the forum. And if you wanted to ask questions, you guys, there's a question and answer section you can post, otherwise with the chat function, and I'll read them periodically throughout the program. But the question here from Diane is, what should people do if they're still pending on benefits and it's been 4 weeks? Can you also speak to underemployed that qualify for, or that don't qualify for state because of the length of employment or amount of hours? Is there any kind of compensation from federal programs?
Sure. Well, and it's obviously been challenging for a lot of people, and we feel your frustration. This is obviously a matter of really serious significance for a lot of people trying to just stay current and feed themselves and feed their families. And so obviously unemployment insurance is meant to be that lifeline when this kind of stuff happens, when folks are let go. And so we've been advising, when folks do apply, to do so online, which is at dwd.wisconsin.gov/UI. We've been able to process as many as 25,000 claims in one day. But any average day, 98 to 99% of claims go through online. And there are going to be claims that require follow-up. We've been calling, prior to March 30th, we were having folks call us. Well, obviously, so last week, just for context, we had 6 million calls come into our call center, which is north of a 10,000% increase from the highest week last year. And so with the call center staff we have, and just the telecom capabilities, I know a lot of folks have really struggled to get through with either busy signals or calls being dropped. And so the people should do is, I guess, we've been asking folks to remain patient. And I guess after March 30th, we've been, instead of having folks call us, we've been prompting claimants, or letting them know that we'll be calling them. And that's been going fairly well. We've been steadily clearing claims that way. But we just appreciate folks' patience at this time. We've been ramping up our staffing. We've moved 100 people within DWD into unemployment insurance. We've got recruitments out for 200 more people. And then also we're asking the state government to allocate 132 transfers into DWD. So, and at the same time, also trying to set up an external call center that would be staffed with about 600 people. So we're moving as fast as government can move, but certainly, hear folks and understand that it's unprecedented, and it's like I said, our folks on the front lines hear it every day. I hear it every day in terms of what this means to people not having the ability to pay for those things and the economic uncertainties and anxieties. So just know that we literally have hundreds of people working overtime to try to clear those claims, but just know that we're working as hard as we can to address the bottleneck, which is our telecom system, and also our online claim system, which is based on 1970 software. So we're doing all we can, but we appreciate your patience, and hopefully we can get you through soon.
What about any federal programs that you know of from individual people? I mean, obviously there's been a lot of talk about the ones for businesses. What about for people? So
sure. The best programs that we've seen, obviously there are a couple different add-ons, and it's interesting as far as eligibility related to hours. I'm not sure of federal programs, but so for state unemployment insurance, you have to be attached to an employer, and you have to qualify based on quarterly wages going back a number of quarters. But that requires you to have been let go through no fault of your own. With the COVID-19 situation that's going on, there's a federal program called Pandemic Unemployment Assistance, also known as PUA, and that's meant to help provide assistance to those that wouldn't otherwise be eligible. So you're self-employed, you're freelancers, you're independent contractors, and we just started taking claims for PUA an hour ago today. So today's the first day of taking PUA claims, and that's based on 1% of last year's income, with a weekly minimum of 163 and a weekly maximum of 370. And then if you're eligible for PUA, you also get FPUC, which is Federal Pandemic Unemployment Compensation, which is an additional $600 per week. And so we're hopeful to work through those claims. The issue with PUA is that those are very manually intensive, but we have staff working on them today and are hopeful to get folks the assistance they need as fast as possible. But those are the two. And the other piece that's important, I guess, is even if you are working part-time or if your hours were reduced, there's a chance that you're eligible for partial unemployment insurance, either through PUA or through the state, depending on whether you're an employee or an independent contractor. And even if you're eligible for the $1 of unemployment insurance, you're eligible for the full $600 in FPUC. So those are helpful. And then other agencies and other groups like the SBA are doing things like paycheck protection, which obviously go through a business, but those will hopefully be helpful to the folks that are working out there or were working.
So I'll go back into COVID and some of that stuff in a second, but I kind of wanted to talk before COVID, and you coming in, this is your first, I guess, year on the job. What was your initial vision for changing? I mean, talk to me even about 1970s software and stuff like that in the organization. What was your vision for changing this organization when you took over it, or what were you kind of looking to do?
Sure. I mean, I think, part of it was a culture change, and it wasn't specific to DWD, but, over the course of the last 8 years, state employees were unabashedly vilified, and they were, made a political pawn and, not treated all that well. And so, as evidenced by Governor Evers' first 2 executive orders, it was really important to come in and I think celebrate the dignity and the importance of state employee work. So I think creating a culture of appreciation was really important to me, appreciating their work, celebrating all that they were doing. And then, from a big picture vision of our programming, it was really important to me to focus on just as much on the quantity of jobs. Obviously, we focus really intently on things like the unemployment rate, but it's also really important that when folks do check the box of being employed, that job not only provides enough to pay one's bills, but it provides enough to save for an adequate retirement, set aside liquidity for the first down payment on a home, all of those things. So I wanted to put a really strong emphasis on the quality of jobs that our programs lead to, and that when we use taxpayer resources to invest in workforce development, that has to result in a quality job, not just a job where a person can barely make it. And so all of our programs that, whether it's apprenticeship, whether it's Wisconsin Fast Forward or DVR programming. It was really important to me that those result in family sustaining wages, and not just, check the box and run up the stats on, quote unquote jobs created. That's obviously really important, but that those jobs created were also quality jobs.
What was the program again? I had a question come up. What was the program again for the self-employed that you were talking about, or you made reference?
Sure. Yep, that's called Pandemic Unemployment Assistance, also known as PUA, and we are taking applications for that as of today.
Oh, excellent.
Yeah.
So, you talked about kind of your vision coming in. Obviously, COVID has made, kind of, you still want to obviously, execute on that vision, but everything has changed. Can you take us through your process of kind of responding to everything and what your team's process has been in the last 30 days, which probably feels like a year in some regard?
Sure. Yeah, our process, it's interesting. We try to be as, responsive as possible, but also be proactive and strategic in, where our programming is going mid-COVID and post-COVID. But obviously, a lot of our attention has been, I guess I should back up. Our initial attention was to make sure our staff was safe and that we were able to get folks out of the building if they were able to work from home. And so that was a big focus for us from an HR standpoint, was just getting folks ready to be able to work from home. But programming wise, obviously we've shifted a lot of resources, personnel and otherwise, into unemployment insurance. I'm trying to think, probably 3 weeks ago, we processed 116,000 new claims, which was more than twice the highest week in the Great Recession. And we've seen for a couple weeks it was sustained about that number. We've seen that drop, and then weekly claims this last week were 315,000, which are the recurring claims for folks. So really massive increases. So trying to make sure that we can expand our capacity in our call center online, but then also strategically address all of the bottlenecks and which are the most significant, and try to get assistance internally within the Hebrews administration, also from the private sector, to help alleviate some of those bottlenecks. So it's been kind of a wild couple weeks, but from 150 to 200 folks working overtime to the assistance we've seen from other agencies raising their hand and stepping up, and folks voluntarily transferring into UI from other areas that might be more interesting and not quite as stressful. It's been a pretty inspiring level of selflessness from across the administration.
For talking about vision and change and kind of response to this, in economics response being really most crucial right now, can you talk a little bit more about your DW's response? Are you hiring more people in unemployment call centers and things like that to process claims, or what's been a couple more responses? There's been some of the questions that came through all around that, and I just want to kind of address those questions all in one swath here.
Sure. Yeah. So we've transferred 90 DWD employees into unemployment insurance from other areas. We had about 16 folks from other agencies step up. We right now currently have 197 new open recruitments as a result of COVID-19. We're hoping to fill by early May through early June. And then we also have an ask into the Department of Administration for 132 additional staff that we're hoping to source from other agencies to make sure that, because it is our call center, but it's also paperwork. It's also administrative tasks that need to be done. And so there's a huge need, and we're hopeful that we can identify those personnel and get them in there as soon as humanly possible, because we know that the stress this is putting on the folks that aren't able to get through, and that claims that require additional work. And part of it also is just our adjudication area. We need to determine eligibility and all those things, and that requires people with adjudication skills. And we've got, I think, 80 or 100 folks currently doing that, but we could certainly use 80 or 100 more. So we're working as hard as we can to identify those folks and get them in that area.
With PPP and some of the programs that have come out from the federal standpoint, and even some local state programs, have you seen any shift in unemployment claims in the last week, or have you seen people kind of get back off of it?
Well, so new claims are dropping off. I don't know if that's related to PPP or if it's just related to the peak was a couple weeks ago. So I don't have it, maybe I do have it up right now, but like I said, that 3 or 4 weeks ago, we peaked at about 116,000 new claims. And since then, it's dropped. Following week was 103. The week after that was 65. Last week was 56,000 new claims. And so we are seeing a drop in new claims, but that recurring number, the folks that continue to file week after week, is climbing pretty steadily. Like I said, last week was 315,000. And just through Sunday and Monday, I think we were at about 275. So it's likely we're gonna blow past 315 by quite a bit. So those numbers continue to climb.
What do you think? How do you think how are you guys preparing for how the economy changes? Maybe coming out of this a little. I know you talked a little bit about, or the governor just released his Badger program, about the bounce back program. Can you discuss that to your knowledge about it, and what you think about that program, and where do you see the economy coming out of this? You're from the Door County, or you lived in the Door County region. I imagine that area is kind of devastated by the tourism if there's nothing happening in the summer there. Just talk a little bit about that and kind of your thought process.
Sure. Yeah, we were really excited to see the Badger bounce back come out yesterday for a number of reasons, but just to, I think highlight the importance of, having adequate testing, having adequate contact tracing when it comes to what are the markers that we're looking at to reopen the economy. And so, I think folks were looking for that, and they were, I think that the feedback thus far has been really positive at, what is it that we're looking to do. And so I think articulating that was a big step yesterday, but, for our programming, it's interesting. When this first hit, most economists that we were listening to and talking to, including our chief economist at DWD, were really looking at what they were hoping would be a V-shaped recovery, and I think that's still the case. But our chief economist, based on national indicators, thinks that we're probably headed toward an unemployment rate, even if it's just temporary, of close to 27%. And so, depending on how consumption resumes when COVID-19 passes, and how well we manage, flattening the curve and keeping the healthcare system, manageable, there's going to be, some businesses that don't make it. And so we're trying to figure out how we can be of greatest assistance to those that are mostly affected. And early on, when, folks were asking which industries were hardest hit, initially it was, food service, restaurants, but then also in-home care, personal care companies. And so we're trying to be as strategic as possible with our employment training division to make sure that they're prepared. And we've been able to transition a lot of those services to remote services, either through the internet or through the phone, because we relatively early on with the governor's order closed all of our job centers. And so trying to be strategic on that. And we've learned a lot. We've learned what can be delivered remotely, including training for things like a plumbing apprenticeship. You can do, instruct things you wouldn't think you'd be able to instruct online way better than expected, but also getting feedback that that face-to-face contact is really important. So we're learning a ton and trying to implement that in real time in our programming for a mid-COVID-19 and post-COVID-19 world.
What about I think we talked to me and you talked about 6 months ago about, we're a totally different place 6 months ago, talking about how do we bring more people to the state, and what do we have to keep people here? How does that change? Like the whole talent strategy of getting, it doesn't seem like it's as relevant to attract more people here, or maybe it is, but that kind of is on hold for now. Where do you see that coming out of this as like this talent initiatives that states have to garner more people and keep their best and brightest here?
Sure. I mean, it's obviously going to depend in large part on how well we recover from this. But I think from my perspective, the strategy remains pretty similar in that, when I was in Door County and we were doing a talent attraction there, and then in this job as well, when we talked to either businesses or employees about, what makes a place an attractive place to be, it's the quality of life, and the indicators for that are in large part, quality school system, adequate broadband, drivable roads, all these things that we've been trying to invest in. And so I think if you have those things and you are attractive to potential employees, then you are more attractive to potential employers whose greatest constraint or bottleneck is personnel. And so I think we continue to focus on, where can we invest in the quality of our state's product, which will hopefully increase the quantity of people that are willing to move here. And so I think it's going to be interesting. And you mentioned the tourism business. I know that there's been an appetite, and I think it's the right connection to have tourism more involved in that talent attraction, because a lot of the people that eventually move to an area first visited it as a tourist. And so I'm hopeful that Secretary Meany over at the Department of Tourism, they've got a lot of high altitude visioning going on and trying to be really strategic about obviously saving a lot of businesses and helping folks through this tough time, but also setting them up for success after this. So we're going to continue to focus on the quality of life here in Wisconsin and investing in that to make it a more attractive place to be. And that includes schools and roads and water quality and broadband and all that stuff that isn't the most exciting to talk about, but it is absolutely the meat and potatoes of what makes a place an attractive place to be.
Yeah, I'm excited to talk about the broadband one. So I actually do want to bring that up. Is there any talk? I mean, obviously, right now, the need for broadband, especially in rural areas across Wisconsin and even in cities, and the accessibility of the broadband, the speed and the quality of it is a huge issue. That's something that is talked about a lot at the state level. This is kind of exemplified, or really brought that to the forefront, that those needs that we were talking about, or wants that we were talking about, are now really needs for people to be connected and communicate. Has that come up a lot? Are you guys talking about broadband initiatives coming out of this? If let's say this is the kind of the new normal for 2 years from now, we're still talking about social distancing, working out of home, and things like that.
Yeah, it's interesting. It started initially, on the first wave of activity was, across the administration, was getting folks to work from home. And it's amazing that in 2020, folks that are working out of our Milwaukee office or our Madison office that might live in a more rural area, they didn't have internet, let alone broadband at home. And so that was, a challenge for us. But then, transitioning into the programmatic side, trying to help people either with job center services or file for unemployment. It's become more apparent what a big deal broadband connectivity is across the state, and it's a real challenge. And so I think we were grateful to see just shy of $24 million of grants be awarded earlier this year. So we're hopeful that that'll make a difference. Obviously, that takes some time to invest and make those investments operational, but it's going to continue to be an issue. And it's hard to believe that it's 2020 and there are parts of Wisconsin and the United States of America that don't have adequate broadband. And the other piece too that we're hearing across the state is for the schools and the families that are trying to learn remotely, whether that's grade school up through high school or college. There are families that just don't have adequate broadband to do that remote learning. So it's a real challenge, and I think it's going to continue to have a sense of urgency behind it because of what's been highlighted through COVID-19.
I'm going to take some questions I have from the audience here, and some of the questions were around kind of the delays, maybe unemployment claims, and I think you addressed that all hands on deck. You guys are working through that, so I'm not going to dive too deep in that, but I have a couple more questions from the audience that I'm just going to read kind of verbatim here. Do you feel you're prepared enough now after this first round, if there's a second round of this virus that spikes, to cause a shutdown again? Do you think things with the unemployment would flow and the process be better and faster? What have you learned in that process, and where can you prepare if this happens again?
Sure. I think we'll definitely be in a better place this next time around. I think we're in the final stages of putting out the bids for that call center, which having hopefully 600 additional persons, 500 to answer calls and 100 to process claims is a game changer. But then also just part of this, at least on the federal side for the new federal programming, has been working with our partners at the Department of Labor at the federal level to interpret their guidance, and because they're setting up programs they've never set up before either. And so our partners are more prepared. We're more prepared. We've been able to expand our telecom piece a fair amount. And luckily our online portal has been working fairly well, but the telecom piece has been a real challenge. So we're hopeful that between updating our website so folks can, hopefully answer a lot of their own questions. But I think we would definitely be in a place to, be prepared and be more seasoned, more, going from 3.5% unemployment 1 week to, 15% or up as high as 25, 27% a month later. You can't help but be better prepared for the next round.
Yeah. Kind of a longer question here, and I think this is probably goes to a lot of confusion. Like, if I apply for one program, can I get funding in a different program, or will one cancel the other one out? So this is from Facebook Live. I'm a sole proprietor. They're on the DWD website today, and they saw they could file for PUA. They started this morning by going through the filling of the normal claim, and then when they clicked on the information, they saw the specific link for the PUA and filed under that as well. Is this going to cause an issue with the claim in the system? Also, what are the specific financial information do you need to gather if my PUA application goes forward? I don't know if you can kind of gather that question.
Sure.
So I think they were applying from a sole proprietor. They were applying for a program, but saw this PUA and applied for that. Will that cancel out any other? Will they cancel each other out, I guess, is the question here.
No, I don't think so. So if you're applying for PUA, that's good. That's where you should be applying. If and when your claim goes through on the state side, they would recognize that as a sole proprietor, you would not be eligible for UI, so that would be deemed ineligible, and that would be cleared. What was the second part?
I think that was kind of the. Is there going to be issue in the claim, and then what financial information do you need to gather? PUA?
Yeah, so it's based on last year's total income, and I'm hopeful that our PUA site's been updated, but it's been tax returns, likely 1099s, but just financial information for the last number of years. And I don't have the exact specifics since we just launched it today, but I can follow up with you, Jeremy, and hopefully you can share with the group after this as to what some of those.
And we can, and this is being recorded as well, and it's on Facebook Live, and we will send out the recording to all the guests. And if they have questions, we can kind of forward along. I'll go into, let's see if we have any more questions here. So one more question here from the audience. If they didn't lose their job to COVID, but their position was eliminated before the budget to COVID, are they eligible for the PUA and these other federal programs, or is that not known at this time?
No, they would not be. We've been required to determine if folks are if their separation was due to COVID or not, and so it's my understanding that would not be eligible. But I'll follow up on that one as well. It's
got to be an interesting, or extremely difficult and because saddening to come into a position like this with all the high hopes of, what can we do to drive the economy? Now, what can we do to help people stay afloat? Those are kind of some of the biggest challenges. What other challenges beyond this do you see beyond COVID that the state was struggling with that maybe you were trying to address?
Well, it was mostly that for me, it was the wage piece and just the normalization of, living paycheck to paycheck. And I think, and it wasn't necessarily, I think a lot of folks will put, shame on the folks that live the way, but it's hard to budget yourself out of poverty when you're earning poverty wages. And so I think that the big challenge for us was to try to change the narrative on that and really require, employers to not require, but if our programming led to a job, to make sure that was a really strong paying opportunity for folks to be self-supporting, and also to just, be able to, like I said, do those things beyond paying your bill. So a challenge, I guess, is to change that paradigm and change that narrative of, I think we heard a lot about the dignity born of hard work, and there certainly is dignity in hard work. But to me and to this administration, that's a two-way street, that if you're going to put in hard work, that has to result in a dignified life, and that stems from a dignified wage. And so, to the extent that we can put our efforts toward making that happen for people, that was a big challenge for us, I think, to do it, not necessarily an or, but do an and, that yes, we should be worried about the number of jobs being filled, but need to make sure that the folks that show up to work and work 40 hours a week are able to you know, pay their bills and set aside a few bucks for tomorrow. And so that's been a challenge, but I think, you know, increasing our emphasis on apprenticeship, which does that. Your average journey worker apprentice, after they complete their apprenticeship program, I should say the median wage for folks that finish an apprenticeship program is north of $80,000. And then for you know, programs like Wisconsin Fast Forward, we've changed our metrics and our scoring rubric to higher weight the programs and the proposed grants that lead to higher wages. And so every chance we can leverage increases for folks, we've been doing that.
And maybe talk a little bit about like regionalizing this stuff, because I don't think everybody, and it took me a while to understand, even though someone that works in this kind of field sometimes, to understand how you guys break up the regions of the state into workforce development. Can you go into a little bit of that for people that don't know all those other resources out there?
Yeah, so it's interesting, and I saw an overlay one time, and it was incredibly frustrating and mind-boggling at the same time in terms of there are economic development regions. There are workforce development areas, which are related to, you know, DWD and DOL. There are tech college, you know, districts, and none of them line up. And so it's really frustrating. You know, you could have as many as 2 or 3 economic development regions inside a workforce development area. And so there's been talk of trying to align those or consolidate. And of course, you know, folks get really sensitive about that. But depending on where you live, you're within a workforce development area where you can leverage, you know, rapid response. You can leverage job centers, different things as it relates to employment. And you're also within an economic development area, which you can help access, you know, economic development programs like loans and grants, the resources that available to WEDC. And so it's just, there are, I think, 11 workforce development areas. I want to say 9 economic development regions and 16 tech college districts. And so it's just interesting. I'm sure Wisconsin is not unique in that sense on how to, you know, to have so many different regions. But of course, it would be perhaps easier for folks to navigate if they were more aligned with each other.
Yeah, totally. A couple more questions from Facebook. Seems to be a lot of questions around PUA, so that might be something to take back here. Sure. I'm just going to read a couple more of these, and they kind of overlap. So, if you're a sole proprietor and you applied for PUA today, is it advisable to send tax return info regardless if needed or not, or should we wait for a response if needed or not? And they also said you've been doing an amazing job under the circumstances. So there you go.
That was nice of him to say. Yeah. So I guess and that's one thing about PUA too, and I try to set realistic expectations. You know, with PUA, folks have 21 days to get us their financial information. So depending on what the fields look like for, you know, submitting documents, you know, I can tell you that it's not based on your tax return AGI, but it's certainly, you know, I guess I'll have to dig in. I don't want to answer and say more is better, but let me get back to folks and hopefully find out what that list of documents would be.
Excellent. Yeah, I can kind of see these are all kind of the same questions around PUA and activation. So maybe a note would be like, how do we get more information about this program out there? So if you have more information to send out, we can send it to all the people that RSVP'd for this program and also send the recording out, because some of the questions are being asked again that we talked about at the beginning around time it's taken for unemployment, things like that. So those questions were answered. If you want to go through the recording, or we'll send out some more information at a later, or as soon as we can. Any other information you want to kind of give to the audience before we're kind of approaching the 40 minutes here that we have time slotted in? Any other information you want to provide to people attending this, and we'll kind of send you off then.
Sure. No, I mean, I think the other important pieces to remember, well, something that happened, started today, and we'll go through the rest of the week. Prior to COVID, Wisconsin had a waiting week in place for unemployment insurance, and so no one got funded their first week of claims. That has since been repealed. And so between today, tomorrow, and Thursday, we're going to pay 154,000 people that waiting week that's been held back. And that'll also it'll be backdated for folks for the FPUC piece of $600 a week. So that's a big deal. So we're excited to be, I think last night we funded the first batch, and that was around $20 million. So if folks were waiting for that first week, that's coming from us. But otherwise, just we really appreciate folks' feedback and patience. Obviously, like I said, we hear from people, tens of thousands a day, or not tens of, but thousands a day from what they're going through, and this is a real a challenge for Wisconsin, and we just want to reassure everyone that we're doing all we can to literally have hundreds of folks work overtime nights and weekends to try to get back to folks, because that's the people that took these jobs at DWD and in unemployment insurance didn't do it for the money. They've done it because they want to help people. And so just know that we've got an incredibly dedicated staff working hard, working long hours. And we're trying to add to it here with a couple hundred more folks in the coming weeks to make sure we can get back to folks. But just to appreciate everyone being on the call today, and thanks for having me here. I really appreciate the time.
Thank you, Caleb. When you have more information, send it to us and we'll send it to our subscribers. So I appreciate it. Appreciate your time today. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Jeremy. Thanks, everyone.
Yep. Take care.